brother. Well, good evening. Yeah, take all this. It's nice to be back in Defiance. I think I talked here 20 or 21 years ago, and it's nice to be back. And it's nice to see some of the people that were here 21 years ago that are still here. And I think that says a lot about this area and this little get-together you have. And I want to take an opportunity now just to thank the people that took the time out of their lives to put this together so we'd have somewhere to be tonight. Let's thank the committee. I always like to start with a moment of silence and follow it with a serenity prayer, please. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. Now, I always like coming to these things, these roundups. I go to a lot of them, and I always wondered why they call them roundups. Anybody y'all ever wonder why they call them roundups? I did. So I looked in the dictionary. You know what it says in the dictionary? It says roundup is a systematic gathering up, as by the police. And I thought, well, that makes sense to me. I'm pretty sure what I'm going to say up here tonight. I'm just not pretty sure what you're going to hear. And there's a story I like to tell. And it's a story about a state trooper. And that state trooper, he's sitting on the side of the road. He's just waiting for somebody to go by, do something wrong. And sure enough, on one day, the boy went driving by in a pickup truck. The back of that pickup truck was full of penguins. And that state trooper, he knew there was something wrong with that. He pulled him over. He says, "Son, where are you going with all those penguins in the back of that pickup truck?" And he said, "Well, officer, we're not going anywhere. We're just out for a ride." He said, "Boy, what's wrong with you? You can't take penguins for a ride. You take those penguins to the zoo." He said, "Yes, sir, I will." The next day, that trooper's in the same spot, and here comes that boy one more time in that pickup truck. Back of that pickup truck is still full of penguins. But on that day, all those penguins are wearing sunglasses. And he knew there was something wrong with that. He pulled them over again. He says, "Son, I thought I told you to take those penguins to the zoo." He said, "Yes, sir, I did. Today we're going to the beach." We all kind of hear and see things differently, don't we? We can be listening to the same person, looking at the same person. You're going to see one thing, hear one thing. I'm going to see one thing, hear one thing. Let me give you an example. There's a room. It's a big room. Sitting in the middle of the room is a table. In the middle of that table, there's a $100 bill. Standing around that table is the perfect man, the perfect woman, Santa Claus, and the Easter Bunny. And the lights went out. Those lights went back on, that $100 bill was gone. Now, who do you think took it? The woman. Had to be the woman, because those other three things don't exist. My name's Tim Towsley. I'm an alcoholic. I did not want to be an alcoholic. My daddy was an alcoholic. He was a member of this fellowship. He got sober in 1946. He passed away in 1980. He had 10 years of continuous sobriety put together at that time in his life. And what that did for me early in my life, it gave me an opportunity to see what an alcoholic was all about, to see what alcoholism was all about, and also to see what Alcoholics Anonymous was all about. I came from a family where I had 6 stepfathers. I had 13 stepmothers. I went to over 20 schools. I never got out of the 8th grade. I left home when I was 14 years old. I've been married 3 times and divorced twice. I've had an opportunity in my life to spend time in boys' homes and detention homes, city jails, county jails, workhouses, psych wards, treatment centers, and penitentiaries. I spent 12 years of my adult life either on parole, probation, or locked behind some kind of door somewhere. And do you know not one of those things I just talked about are the reasons I came through the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous? Those were merely the situations my disease of alcoholism created in my life. But on June 23rd, 1982, I woke up at the bottom. It's the bottom they talk about in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's when you know a loneliness, such as few men know. It's when you're at that jumping off place. You're wishing for the end. You can no longer imagine life with or life without alcohol. And that's the bottom. That's not a high bottom. But you know, it's not a low bottom either. You see, this is just my bottom I'm talking about. And my bottom is the only bottom I ever need to concern myself with in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't ever want to be in a position in my sobriety where I can sit out in a room, listen to a speaker speak, and start thinking things like, you know, maybe I wasn't that bad, huh? Or maybe I was worse. As soon as I can sit out there and I can make myself believe I'm different in any way from anybody else in a room of Alcoholics Anonymous, as soon as I can make myself believe I'm unique in any way from anybody else in a room of Alcoholics Anonymous, then I have reservations, don't I? And there was an old timer in Brea, Ohio, used to tell me all the time, he said, Tim, if you got reservations, son, you must be going somewhere. And I don't want to go anywhere today. I like it here. That's my wife I just left. I like it here today. I had my first drink at 13. I got sick. I blacked out. I passed out. I woke up in the backyard of a lady's house in Rocky River, Ohio. I had my last drink at 30, and I got sick, and I passed out, and I blacked out, and I woke up at home in bed, and really, that's the only difference. 17 years of use and abuse, and the only real difference was where I woke up. But I know one thing for sure today. You see, I know God wants me in Alcoholics Anonymous. That lady came out of her back door. She found me in her backyard. She took me in her house. She cleaned me up, called my mama, let my mama know I was okay. 17 years later, I walked through the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous. I was sober about 2 weeks. I went to a meeting, and that woman was speaking at that meeting. My very first drunk, I found myself in the arms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And what she did for me that night was all she knew how to do. She was sober about 60 days when she found me in her backyard. And what they told her to do at her home group was help a drunk. They didn't tell her only help the old drunks or the young drunks, the male drunks or the female drunks, the black drunks or the white drunks. They told her to help a drunk, period. And that's what she did that night. And do you know, I still see that woman at meetings today. She just turned 90 years old, and she's coming up on 50 years sober. And do you know what she's doing? She's helping drunks. Now, there's two things I ran from most of my life. I'm not crazy about them today. I have an awful lot of them in my life today, and I still don't like them. But I don't run from them. I deal with them. And those two things are responsibility and authority. Oh, I don't like being responsible. I don't know if y'all are aware of this. But there's a lot of responsibility involved with being responsible. And I certainly don't like people telling me I'm supposed to be responsible. And it seemed like in my life, 13 years old, everybody had an idea about Tim's life. How long his hair should be, how tight his jeans should be, how high the heels on his boots should be. Everybody had an idea about Tim's life. No one asked Tim. I'm 14 years old. I'm at a family gathering. I'm listening to people talk. And I heard somebody say this. They said, my real daddy was in New Orleans, and he was sober. And with that information, I left home the next day. Because you see, I knew what my problem was. It wasn't what I was doing or who I was doing it with. My problem was I didn't have my real father in my life. If I could get my real father in my life, everything would be okay. I made my way to New Orleans. I contacted Alcoholics Anonymous. They found my daddy for me, and they put us together. And all of a sudden, I had a father and he had a son. And we tried to be those two things. But we'd never been either of those two things before. We didn't know what we were doing. We did the best we could, but it just didn't work out. After about 30 or 40 days, my daddy started drinking again. And I can remember falling into my mother's living room at 13 years old, passing out, having her scream at me the next morning, son, don't drink. Please don't drink. You'll get what your daddy has. But I never saw what she was trying to keep me from getting until I watched him drink. I watched him get drunk. I watched him go into the DTs. I watched the people from Alcoholics Anonymous come into our little house and take him away and put him in Bridge House in New Orleans. And I made a decision on that day. I'm not going to be an alcoholic. I'm not going to end up like my daddy ended up. And I didn't have another drink for the next 4 years. I really didn't do much anything for the next 4 years. I just traveled all around this country. I hitchhiked all around this country. If I woke up in Los Angeles and I didn't care for it, I'd go to Miami. Miami didn't please me, I was up to Atlanta. Got tired of Atlanta and I'd go to Dallas. Because see, all of a sudden, here I am. I've got no authority. I've got no responsibility. I got the rest of my life to do whatever it is I think I want to do. I'm in the city of New Orleans, and it's 1966, huh? And I guess I was a hippie. At least that's what folks called me. Now, I had 4 good years. My expectations were met. If I had a pack of cigarettes, a sleeping bag, and something to eat on that day, it was a good day. My expectations were met. The big book of Alcoholics Anonymous tells me this: that my serenity level is inversely proportional to my expectations. And I don't know about you, I know a little bit about me today. And I can tell you this about me. Do you know if I get exactly, now I mean exactly, what I think I'm supposed to have, exactly, when I think I'm supposed to have it, I'm a pretty happy guy, huh? But as soon as I don't, my expectations aren't met and my serenity level goes down. All of a sudden, 18 years old, I don't want to play anymore. I want some stuff. I want some American dream. I want some of the things I see on the billboards and the magazine ads that tell me, if I drive this kind of car, then I'm okay. If I wear these kind of clothes, I'm okay. If I live in that kind of neighborhood, then I'm okay. And all of a sudden at 18 years old, I think I want to be okay and I want some stuff. And me and a buddy of mine left Berkeley, California. We started hitchhiking east because I'm coming back to Cleveland. We got picked up and a guy dropped us off in Utah. To this day, I don't know where I was in Utah. He dropped us off at an off-ramp that had no convenience stores, no gas stations, no houses, no nothing. It was just a road in the middle of the mountains, in the middle of nowhere, Utah. And that's where we slept that night. We woke up the next morning about froze to death up in those mountains. Walked down to the bottom of the on-ramp. Sitting in the middle of the on-ramp, all by itself, in the middle of Utah, at 6 o'clock in the morning, is a 6-pack of Olympia beer. I know God wants me in Alcoholics. I drank 3 beers, he drank 3 beers. I looked at him, I said, you know, if I ever get back to Cleveland, I'm settling down. I'm going to marry the first girl I see. That's part of the American dream. You got to have the wife. Excuse me. I got back to Cleveland. My stepfather wasn't home, I was allowed in the house. I took a shower, I changed my clothes, I borrowed my mother's car. I drove to the corner, picked a young lady up hitchhiking, and we got married. We got married that day. But you know, I think we might have. But back then in the state of Ohio, the male had to be 21 who had parental consent, and the female had to be 18 who had parental consent. And when I married my first wife, I was 18 and she was 15. And this was not a marriage that was made in heaven. We didn't know anything about being married. We didn't know anything about being in love. I can't tell you to this day if I loved her. I can tell you this. I live in my brother's van in the driveway of my parents' home because I haven't been allowed in our house since I'm 14 years old. She lives wherever she can because there's things going on in her house that she doesn't want to go back to. And that brought us together, see. We weren't alone anymore. And that was enough for us, just not to be alone. And it was a simple marriage. I got up in the morning, I got drunk. She'd get up in the morning and she'd get drunk. And then we'd beat each other up. And we did that one day at a time for about 7 years. But out of that 7 years, I was away a lot. I travel a lot. I travel a lot then, I travel a lot now. I just been traveling my whole life, it seems. But this part of my life was a little different. I'd walk into a room, big room like this, and there'd be a man in the front of the room. He'd have a long black coat on. And every time he did this, I went somewhere. I just always in trouble. seemed like 12 years of my life, I really only did two things. I got ready to go to jail, and I got ready to come home from being in jail. Now, I wasn't a violent criminal. I was a stupid criminal. I got arrested for stupid stuff. I got arrested for stuff like verbal abuse of a police officer. That was in a little city called Parma, Ohio. I got arrested for obscene finger language to a police officer. And that was in Parma, Ohio. And if y'all don't know anything about Parma, Ohio, I want to tell you this. They got no sense of humor, man, in Parma, Ohio. I was at a meeting one night. I was about 2 years sober. I don't know about anybody else. 2 years sober, I was pretty close to the smartest person in Alcoholics Anonymous when I was 2 years sober. You ever go to a meeting, you hear somebody say something? You know you've heard that same person say that same 50 times, right? But now, all of a sudden it makes sense. There was an old-timer talking. He was my guy. You got a guy? He was the guy that when I walked into the room and I saw him there, I felt better already. He didn't even have to know I was there. I never even had to talk to him. But if I saw him in the room, I knew it was going to be okay, and I felt better already. And his name was Vic. And Vic stood up here that night and he said this. He said, I've been arrested 63 times. I wasn't a good criminal. Man, I picked right up on that. I know I've been charged with 63 crimes. I wasn't a good criminal. People that did what I did, got caught as often as I got caught, weren't real good at what they were doing. Now, that verbal abuse case of a police officer, I learned something else in that case. You see, I decided to represent myself in that case. What's so funny? I knew I saw enough Perry Mason Judd for the defense, huh? No, I can do this. I went to court, I called witnesses, I cross-examined witnesses, gave my final arguments to the judge. Y'all know what I found out, right? I'm not a very good attorney either. Back to the workhouse. That's just the way my life went. 1975, I stood in front of a judge in the old Lakeside Courthouse in downtown Cleveland, and he sentenced me to 20 to 40 years in the penitentiary. And I took a big sigh of relief on that day. I felt good on that day. I felt better than I had in a long time on that day. Now, I can hear my wife and my mother in the back of the courtroom, they're crying. They don't think I should go away, and they don't want me to go for that long. But I know something, see? I know something they don't know. They don't know that there's no place on earth that they can send me that's going to hurt me as much as I've already hurt myself. And that judge has no idea. There's no way he can punish me any more than I've already punished myself. And I'm ready to go anywhere where I might have a better chance. Now, in 1976, the laws in Ohio changed. My sentence went from a 20 to 40 to a 1 to 10, and 3 years later, they sent me home. When I got home, my stuff was gone. You know all the stuff you had to have to be okay, the stuff I had to have to fit into this world, to have some of the American dream was gone. My car was gone, my wife was gone, my motorcycle, my clothes, my jewelry. Everything was gone. And that left nothing but me. And I didn't do anything for the next 30 or 40 days but drink. I crawled into a bottle of alcohol. I got as drunk as I could, blacked out as I could, passed out as I could, as many times that day as I needed to. I crawled into a bottle of alcohol. Not once in my life have I ever crawled into a bottle of alcohol to hide from you. Never have I crawled into a bottle of alcohol to hide from them. I got as drunk as I could, blacked out as I could, passed out as I could, as many times that day as I needed to. I crawled into that bottle to hide from me. You see, I knew what I was. I was an ex-con, I was an ex-husband, I was an ex-brother, I was an ex-son. I failed at everything I ever tried to do. But if I was drunk enough, I didn't have to look. Finally, a friend of mine came and took me out of there, almost physically, took me out of my home. I'm not going to let you sit here and drink yourself to death. You're out of prison. It's time to start living again. And he took me to a little place in Cleveland we call the Flats. And this is a long time ago. This is before they ruined the Flats. You know, they yuppied it all up. The Flats used to be a really nice place to go get drunk. You drank Jim Beam bourbon and Pabst Blue Ribbon beer, and all the barroom floors were flooded. It was a wonderful, wonderful place. You never went to the Flats for dinner? You didn't go to Flats on your boat? You certainly never went to the Flats to drink something that came from something called the microbrewery, for Christ's sake. We walked into a little bar that night called the Pirates Cove. My cousin's band was playing. They're playing a Marshall Tucker tune. I'm drinking Pabst Blue Ribbon, and I'm about half in the bag. And this pretty little girl walked past me, and she smiled at me. You know, I smiled right back at her. And that was her. That was my future ex-wife. Who shall heretofore be known as the plaintiff. That's who that was. Let me tell you about my second wife. She came into my house. She had some stuff with her. I think I had some of that stuff once. I just don't know where it went. But she brought things with her. She brought things with her like honesty. She brought unselfishness. She brought love, and she brought purity. These are the things she came with. And 4 years later, she left. And she only had one thing to take with her at that point, and that was the disease of alcoholism. I'm not the only one I hurt when I pick up a drink. I touch a lot of lives, and I know that today. I for a couple of years to do the right thing. I had a parole officer, didn't bother me too much. I had a decent job, and I was moving up and going to work and not being late at work and working any overtime they wanted. For 2 years, I tried to do the right thing. Right? 2 years. Are you listening to me? After 2 years of doing the right thing, I'm sitting on my couch one night, drunk, and I'm surveying my dynasty, huh? Do you know after 2 years of doing the right thing, I don't have a house on the lake? I don't have a Porsche in my driveway. I don't wear the right kind of clothes, and I don't belong to the right kind of clubs after 2 years. So I came to a conclusion that night, that those things were for other people. And no matter what I did, I'm just one of the people that's not supposed to have them. So I woke up the next morning, called my boss, and quit my job. My wife lasted for about 2 more years, and then she had to go. And this is my life at 30 years old. You know those family gatherings we have? We got one coming up, Thanksgiving. Maybe it's Easter or Mother's Day. We're going to go somewhere. We'll sit at a table. We'll hold hands. We'll say grace. We'll share a meal with each other. When we're done eating, we're going to sit around and we're just going to share what's going on in each other's lives. This is the way it works at my house. I pull into my parents' driveway and I blow the horn. When they hear the horn inside, my little brother comes out of the back door. He has a paper plate in his hand, and it's wrapped in tin foil. And he hands me my holiday meal. And I'm allowed to sit in my car and eat my holiday meal off a paper plate with a plastic knife and a plastic fork. I can't sit at their table. I can't hold their hands and say grace. And they don't want me to share anything with them that's going on in my life at that time. But I don't want you to think they stopped loving me. Not even this much did their love diminish for me at that time in my life. They simply realized that every time they reached down and stopped me from hitting my bottom, every time they allowed me not to be responsible for my own actions, they were killing me. Do you see, my parents loved me so much, they let me go. I don't have any children. I can only imagine how much love that must take. June 23rd, 1982, I woke up at that bottom I told you about. And I didn't know what to do. And when I didn't know what to do in my life, I always did the same thing. I made a phone call. I don't know if I made that phone call 100 times or 1,000 times. It was always the same phone call. It was simple. It was, Mom, help. And my mom came. I couldn't go to her, but she would always to me. She walked into my little house. I'm kneeling on the living room floor. I'm crying uncontrollably. I'm shaking apart. I have hepatitis, and I weigh 112 pounds. And the first words out of my mother's mouth were, I'll kill her for doing this to you. Alcoholism. This is a family disease. Blaming others is a big part of this disease, and my mother has it too. We made some phone calls, and I found myself in an emergency room. I got a doctor playing with my liver. He says, son, you have an alcohol problem. And I said, no. Not me. And we're arguing back and forth because I told y'all I didn't want to be an alcoholic. He says, son, I don't care what you want to be or don't want to be. If you don't stop drinking, you're going to die. And I heard him say that. I spent the next 10 days in a psych ward on the east side of Cleveland. The first 3 in restraints. I'm powerless over alcohol. My life had become unmanageable. Now that sounded just a little bit like step 1, didn't it? Just a little. Now I got a psychiatrist in my psych ward. I have the happiest psychiatrist on earth in my psych ward. And he comes to visit me every morning happy. Tim, how you doing? Good to see you. Isn't it a wonderful day, huh? I don't know about the rest of y'all. 7 o'clock in the morning in a psych ward on the east side of Cleveland, tied to the bed. I'm not real spiritual. I'm just not. And I told him what I thought. And he just did what psychiatrists do. Y'all know what they do, right? They write in their charts. They nod their heads. That's what they do. And they go away. And pretty soon they make you take that test, don't they? Did you ever take the test? Man, I'd like to have a nickel for every time I took the test. Every time they sent me somewhere, they made me take the test. The MMPI test. It's got 600 questions on it. There's only one question on that test I can't answer. It's my favorite question on the whole MMPI test. It says, do you urinate more than most people? I don't know. On the third day, that psychiatrist came into my room, and I don't want to forget this day. He undid the straps. He put his chart in the windowsill. He sat on my bed. He said, Tim, I can't make your wife come home. I don't have a job to give you. I won't make a house payment for you. But if you never want to take another drink, as long as you live, I can tell you how to do that. One day at a time. This psychiatrist was a recovering member of the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. I know that God wants me here. He shared a little bit of his story with me. Then I shared a little bit of my story with him. And all of a sudden, it was no longer I'm powerless over alcohol. My life had become unmanageable. All of a sudden, it became we. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. And that's step 1. And I know today, without the we, I don't have a chance, man. 7 days later, he gave me something. He gave me my prescription. Most valuable thing anybody's ever given me. He gave me a meeting scheduled at Alcoholics Anonymous in the city of Cleveland. He said, when you get home, I want you to do 2 things. I want you to go to the meeting. When you get to a meeting, you get yourself a sponsor. And I got home, and I didn't know what to do, and I told y'all what I do, and I don't know what to do. I called my mama. I said, Ma, I got to go to an AA meeting. She said, I'll come get you. My mom knows all about Alcoholics Anonymous. She went to meetings with my daddy in the 40s and the 50s. There's been a big book in my house as long as I can remember. She dropped me on your doorstep. It was July 4th. It was 1982. And she left me with a little advice I want to share with you. She said, I'm not coming back to get you. You go to the front table, you tell the people at the front table you're new. You don't have a car, you don't have a driver's license, you need a ride home. And you stay away from the women in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I paid attention to just about half of my mama's advice, but I got a sponsor that night. He gave me stuff to do. His wife was a chairperson. She handed me the traditions, asked me if I'd read, and I backed up. I said, geez, I don't know, honey. You know, they just took the straps off me. You might want to find someone else to do that. And he just looked at me. You know how they look at you. He said, here's your first lesson in Alcoholics Anonymous, Tim. You never say no to Alcoholics Anonymous. No matter what the request, the answer is yes. That's all you're ever going to need to know about that. Then he said, if you sat in a chair, you put it away. If you had a coffee cup, you throw it away. If you had an ashtray, this was a long time ago when AA was civilized. He said, you empty it. He said, I want you to read one page of the big book every day. Don't turn the page until tomorrow. Read that page as many times that day as you want to or think you need to, but do not turn the page until tomorrow. And maybe, just maybe, in 164 days, you might know something about the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. He said, if you're not praying, this is how you're going to start. You're going to use 3 words your mother taught you when you were a little boy. You're going to get up in the morning and kneel down, and you'll say, please. You'll go about your day, and at the end of that day, you're going to kneel back down, and you'll say, thank you. Please and thank you. My mama taught me those words when I was a little boy. Do you know what she called them? Magic words, huh? What's the magic word, Timmy? No matter what I wanted, it was, what's the magic word? I had no idea how much magic those words held until I came here to you and you showed me how to use them. My sponsor asked me that question. Now, I don't have a lot of opinions from up here, but let me give you one. Newcomers come in here, and sometimes we say stupid stuff to newcomers, huh? A newcomer's going to walk in the door, and we're going to say something to him like, there's no such thing as a stupid question, right? Then we're going to ask them 2 or 3 stupid questions, right? And I don't know if your sponsor asked you. My sponsor asked me. He said, do you want what I have? I said, geez, I don't know, buddy. What do you got? You know, I didn't know what he was trying to offer me. My sponsor had a brand new Tornado. He wore a Rolex watch. His wife was a flight attendant, had the prettiest green eyes I ever saw in my life. Do I want what you got? Well, hell yeah, what page is that on? See, because I got to tell you, when I got here, I did not want what you had. And I don't think it's the newcomer's responsibility to want anything to come through that door. Because when I came through that door, I did not want what you had. But I knew for sure that I did not want what I had. And once they come in that door, it becomes my responsibility to have something for them that's more attractive than what they have now. I came to believe by watching you that my life would change. I came to believe that if I did what you did, I could have what you had. And I knelt down with my sponsor and I said a 3rd step prayer. I don't know what the rest of y'all thought about the 3rd step or the 3rd step prayer the first time you saw it. First thing went through my mind was, well, what if it works? Huh? Then what? So my sponsor comes over. I said, all right, we're going to kneel down. He said, that's right. I said, I'm going to turn my will and my life over to the care of God. He said, that's right, too. I said, then what? He said, we don't know. I said, you don't know? Now, you got to do better than that. You got to give me something here. So he did. And if you got one, you can understand the 3rd step, too. I always have one. It's a penny. If you look at the back of the penny, you're going to see the Lincoln Memorial. But do you know what happens as soon as you turn it over? On the front of the penny it says, "In God we trust." And that's the third step. That step's not about God's will. That step is about my will. Am I willing to trust God with it today? And I can tell you I am. And once you can do that, there's another word at the bottom of that penny. That word's liberty. It's the freedom you can have just by trusting God a day at a time. I started on a 4-step, but most of y'all out here are pretty smart. You probably know that's not one you want to rush right into, right? No, really, you really got to take your time with that 4-step because you got to read all them books, don't you? If we don't got nothing in Alcoholics Anonymous, buddy, we got books. We got blue books, we got blue and blue books, we got little blue books, little black books, little green books, little red books, we got lists, we got guides. We even have experts in Alcoholics Anonymous today. And if you don't talk to every old-timer in the world, read every one of those books, you're going to mess the 4-step up, aren't you? There's only one way to do the 4-step wrong. Don't do it. That's the only way you can do the 4-step wrong is don't do it. I read all those books. I talked to every old-timer in Cleveland. I'm sober 32 years. And do you know I'm still not 100% sure what Mr. Jones's problem is? I'm sitting at home one night, and my phone rang. It's my sponsor. He said, "How's that 4-step coming, Tim?" I said, "Oh, it's coming right along, coming right along." And then he gave me something you shouldn't give your newcomer too much of. He gave me information. He said, "It'll get done in God's time." And you know, that's exactly what I was thinking too, that 4-step was going to get done. And I said, "Yeah, it'll get done in God's time." And I hung the phone up. About 5 minutes later, the phone rang. It's my sponsor. He said, "Hey, how's that 4-step coming, Tim?" But I got something now, right? I gave it right back to him. I said, "It's going to get done in God's time." He said, "That's a good thing because God's time is tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. He was just always helping me like that, you know? I did a 4th and a 5th. I wrote down what happened. Then I shared with God and another human being and found the reasons why it happened. And once I did that, I had to become entirely ready for those character defects to go away. But you know, I couldn't do it by myself. I had to humbly ask a power greater than myself for help. And he sent me to the 8th step, to my list. And my sponsor's on his way over, and we're going to go over this 8 and 9 deal. And we're going to get started on these amends. And I'm looking at my list. And I see this guy over here, right? I did that to him. I don't dispute it. Guilty, right? But you know, he did this to me. I scratched him off the list. That's a push, man. No, we're even. And I'm steady scratching people off my list. By the time my sponsor gets there, there's no one on the list but my mama. He said, "I don't think you understand this." I said, "I think I'm doing pretty good." He said, "Tim, this isn't about them. Their faults will not be discussed. This is about you. And the first thing you need to do is forgive. You need to forgive everybody that ever wronged you. Because until you can do that, you will never have the right to ask anybody else for any kind of forgiveness." And I learned to forgive. I went out and I made direct amends to the people I've wronged. And do you know, before I was halfway through, those promises started coming true, just like the book says. I have that Porsche in the driveway today. You know, I keep it disguised as a Toyota, but you might see it someday, and you might think, "Well, that's not a Porsche. That's a Toyota." But you got to remember this. There's only one person right now, right here, that's looking out of your eyes. And that is the only person that's ever going to be responsible for what you see. You can see good or you can see bad, but you're the one looking. You see, I'm going to get inside my car. Alcoholics Anonymous is an inside job. I spent most of my life thinking if I could make the outside look good enough, the inside would feel better. Until I came here and you showed me how to work from the inside out. And I'm getting inside my car. I'm not getting in a Toyota, I'm getting in a Porsche. Carrera. 4S. Turbo. It's got a Bose CD system with a 12-disc changer. And I'm going to hit those power windows. And Monday I'll go to my job. You know the job I didn't used to have when I was drinking? I'll see my friends there. Those would be the friends I didn't used to have when I was drinking. You know, I know how to live resentment-free today. I didn't say I did. I said I know how to. It's just another thing. I come into Alcoholics Anonymous, you tell me, pray for my enemies. Have you heard this one out here? Pray for my enemies, right? I thought, this is ludicrous. So I called my little brother. And I told him, I said, they want me to pray for my enemies. And he said, my little brother's a born-again Christian. He says, it's true, Tim, you should. And he showed me in the Bible. Do you know what it says in the Bible? It says, praying for your enemies is like heaping hot coals upon their heads. I like that. That's not what you told me. Because I don't know about anybody else. When I got here, I had some resentments. Like my ex-wife, the plaintiff. She left with my dynasty, right? But I still wanted her to do something nice for her. You know, like maybe get her a new car. Maybe a 72 Pinto with no brake lights, something like that. She's a good friend today, my ex-wife. She calls me on my sobriety date and on my birthday. We've been in touch the whole time. And it's only because of Alcoholics Anonymous. Every once in a while I have to remind her I haven't had a drink since you left, but I'm not judging, I'm just saying. You know, I don't know who has your message, do you? Are you waiting for somebody with 75 years sobriety? Because just maybe the person God sent with your message today isn't even going to get sober for 75 more minutes. I know this, that if there's somebody talking and I can hear them, God wants me to listen. I got a message on the first step about 20 years ago. I was invited to speak in Valparaiso, Indiana. And my wife couldn't go with me that weekend, so I took one of my new guys with me. And I didn't want to take my car because I didn't think my car would make it to Indiana. So I took my wife's car. She was driving a Honda Civic back then. And you know, on a Honda Civic, what do you get in a Honda Civic? 400 miles to a gallon in a Honda Civic, right? No, seriously, you drive a Honda Civic pretty much from now on. Never had to put gas in a Honda Civic. Me and my new guy, we head for Valparaiso, Indiana. We went underneath the sign that said my exit was about 5 exits up. And I looked down. And the gas gauge said empty. And I'm thinking, well, yeah, empty like in a real car empty, but empty in a Honda Civic, you got to have 100 miles left. There's only 50 left in Indiana. I'm going to be fine. Excuse me. I never gave it another thought until we went underneath the sign and said my exit was 2 miles. And as soon as I went underneath that sign, I ran out of gas. If you got a Honda Civic and it says empty, I'm going to tell you they're dead serious about that. That's exactly what they mean. Now, I coasted for another mile, and I pulled over to the side of the road. And there I was on the side of the road, out of gas, in the middle of Indiana. Got a new guy sitting next to me. You know, I don't even want to turn and look at him. I just spent the better part, about 4 hours, telling him all about responsibility and stuff like that. But I had to do something. I couldn't sit in Indiana the rest of my life. So I turned and I looked. He just grinned. You know how they are. Oh, they'll stay sober a long time just waiting for you to mess up just so they can point it out. He looked over at me and he said, "We're powerless, ain't we?" Thank you. I said, "Yeah, you bet we are." I said, "What do you think we ought to do about it?" He said, "Well, I think we better admit it." I could have sat there the rest of my life going, vroom, 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 vroom. If I never admit there's a problem, there's never a reason for me to seek a solution. I don't know who has your message today. Are you listening? I take one word out of each of the last 3 steps. That's how I live my life. Continue, improve, and practice. Each one of those words is an action word. You got to do something if you want something. My book says half measures avail me nothing. It doesn't say half measures avail me half. It says nothing. And I don't know about you. I've had more nothing in my life than I want. I don't want any more nothing. I want everything that my God wants me to have. And I don't even know what that is. But if he wants it for me, I want it too. There's a difference in my life today I'll share with you. I go to the prisons and I talk to the guys in the penitentiaries. I used to do it a lot more than I do now. I got hepatitis C and went through interferon treatment for it a couple times and was just sick for 2 years. And there are other responsibilities that changed in my life that didn't give me the freedom to go when I wanted to go. And they changed things in Ohio. You know, you used to be able to you drive up, you give them your driver's license, you go in. All of a sudden in Ohio, you got to fill an application out. I never had to fill an application out to get into a penitentiary before. I was always pre-approved when I got there. I was out at the Allen Correctional Institute about 25 years ago, I guess. And I gave a little talk. And a guy came up to me after the meeting. He said, "Can I call you?" I say, "Sure, you can call me." And I forgot. You want to call somebody from the penitentiary, you got to call collect. But I'll accept a collect phone call in my life today. Let me tell you why. Because on April 10th, 1989, I went to a meeting. There was a young lady speaking at the meeting that night. And I don't know what your sponsor told you. My sponsor told me this a lot. He said, "Tim, if you go to a meeting and you hear something you like, take it home." And on October 16th, 1993, we got married. I married a young lady named Mary, a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I married a very intelligent woman named Mary, a very educated woman named Mary. My wife has more letters after her name than I have in my name. She just loves school. She's been in school long as you can go to school. She got a BA. She has a MA. She has a MACT. She was ABD. Then she got a PhD. And then she got my personal favorite. And that's a JOB. One of my friends asked me once, he said, "Doesn't that intimidate you? That your wife's so educated, your wife's so intelligent, doesn't that intimidate you?" And I had to stop and think about it for a minute, because I never had before. And I said, no. No, it doesn't intimidate me at all. It makes me proud. I am proud of my wife's accomplishments because 26 years ago, she came through that door, and she didn't have any letters after her name. But because of a God of her understanding, a book called Alcoholics Anonymous, and the women in her home group that told her, once you come through that door, if you're willing to do the work, you can be anything you want to be. She trusted God, she worked hard, and she accomplished. I can't be intimidated by that, only proud. I'm proud just to be a member of something that can make that happen. I'm so proud I got new license plates for my car. You know those vanity plates? Don't you hate those things? I think they're the stupidest things on earth, but I have some. You know what my license plates say? They say PhD, GED. I got letters after my name, too. We had an AA wedding. It started with the Serenity Prayer, and it ended with the Lord's Prayer. There was a reading in between from the 12 and 12. I was reminded on that day, back in 1975, when they walked me into the bullpen at that old Mansfield State Reformatory in Mansfield, and they told me I could make a phone call. They walked me up to the phone. They said, you have this much time to use this phone. You can call anywhere in the world you want, but you have to collect. And I stood there and dialed. And I dialed some more. And I dialed, and I dialed, until I had no time left. Do you know I couldn't find one person on earth, not one, that would accept a collect phone call from me at that time in my life, not one. We invited 320 people to that wedding. Do you know how many came? About 360. Do you see the difference? The difference in my life from then to now. But there's a difference in me. About 12 years ago, 15 years ago, my stepfather got sick. He had Alzheimer's disease, and it's a terrible, terrible thing to watch. And Al-Anon once told me that it's a lot like what they see as they look at us and they watch us deteriorate in front of their eyes, and there's nothing they can do about it. They can't help him. And my mother couldn't do it all by herself. So I stepped in to give Mom a little hand. And then it got to be dangerous. He was escaping from the house. He was taking the hinges off the doors and stealing the car, and the police were bringing him back, and it was a dangerous situation, so we had to find somewhere else for him to go. And we wound up at the Sandusky Navy, the old Navy home. It's just a wonderful, wonderful place in Sandusky. They have 3 Alzheimer's units there, and they just took really good care of him, and that's what we'd do on weekends. Me and my mom would go to Sandusky, and we'd visit my stepfather. And after about 8 or 9 months, he passed away. That left me with an 82-year-old mother at home. And Mom did pretty good for a long time. She broke her hip a couple times. She had a couple of strokes. But she got around on her walker. And she did pretty good. And Mom didn't want to go in any kind of a home. And we had that talk. I said, Ma, look. You know, the first few years of my life, you changed my diapers. You cleaned up my messes. You fed me. You took care of me. If I have to do that for you, the last few years of your life, I would be more than happy to do that. And she looked at me and she said, as only a mother could say, she said, the first few years of your life. The first 30 years of your life. I was blessed because of my business partners, an understanding wife, and the people in Alcoholics Anonymous. Mom didn't have to go anywhere. She stayed in her house. I had a woman that took care of her during the day. And after work, I'd go over, make her dinner. And I'd get her cleaned up and put her in her pajamas and get her in bed. And then I'd go to a meeting. On the weekends, I'd go and I'd be there all weekend. And I'd just look after Mom. Whatever she needed. Some days she didn't need anything. She didn't want anything. And some days she needed a little extra care. But that's what I did on weekends. You know what I like to do on weekends? I like to play golf. And I wasn't able to for a long time because of the Hep C and the interferon treatments and just the lack of energy. Wasn't able to do anything. But I still had friends that played. And one of them called me one day and he said, you know, Tim, we have an opening in the foursome Sunday morning. Would you like to play with us? I said, boy, you know, I can't think anything I'd rather do more than play golf with you guys on Sunday morning, but I won't be able to. I'll be with my mom Sunday morning. And he said, do you have to be with your mom on Sunday morning? I said, no. No, I don't have to be with my mom on Sunday morning. No, I get to be with my mom. I get to be there. I want to share something with you my mother told me. I think it's the most valuable thing she's ever said to me. I told you I'd get her in her jammies and put her to bed. And it'd be time to go to a meeting. I'd give her a kiss on her forehead and I'd say, Mom, I'm going to a meeting. I love you. And isn't it when we tell somebody we love them, wouldn't we like them to say, I love you too? That's what we'd like to hear. I love you too. On one particular night, I went back. I gave my mom a kiss on her forehead. I said, Mom, I'm going to a meeting. I love you. And she didn't say, I love you too. She said something much, much more important than that. She said, I know you do. I know you do. People should know we love them long before we have to tell them. Is there somebody in your life, every once in a while, that goes through your mind? I should call them. I should check on them. I should see how they're doing. Quit thinking about it and do it. It's really hard to make amends at the funeral home. On June 1st, 2005, I was kneeling next to my mother's bed. And I was holding her hand. And at 4:45 on that day, the angels came. They took her hand from mine, and they put it in God's. And I was able to do something that day. Something you taught me, and I'll never be grateful enough. You taught me to let go and let God. Now, I don't know why you think I took care of my mom. Could have been my great cooking, huh? That probably wasn't it. Could have been because I was in prison all those years, she never missed a visit. Might have been my vast medical knowledge, huh? Now, I've written some prescriptions in my lifetime. But that wasn't it. Maybe you think it was ninth step work, huh? It wasn't. It was 12th step work. In all my affairs, I got a chance. I got a chance to use the verbs. Maybe my English teacher doesn't think there were verbs. Son is a verb. Brother is a verb. Husband is a verb. Friend is a verb. I got the opportunity to do all the things that I didn't do before. And it wasn't amends, it was what I was supposed to be doing. There's a big difference in me. I'm going to share that with you. Every weekend I'm in town, I go to the cemetery and I put flowers on my mother's grave. And I'd like to be able to tell you she sees me. I can't prove it, but I'd like to be able to tell you she sees me. And this is the big difference in me. Do you know why I put flowers on my mother's grave? Because I said I would. I'm accountable today. I'm responsible today. I do what I say I'm going to do today. And one day, maybe she'll tell me that she saw me. We got a lot of purposes in Alcoholics Anonymous, don't we? Well, we got a primary purpose. We got a singleness of purpose. My favorite is our real purpose. And that is to fit myself, to become of maximum use to my God and to those about me. Not just here, everywhere. Remember this. What you do today, between the Serenity Prayer and the Lord's Prayer, it's not as important as what you're going to do today between the Lord's Prayer and the Serenity Prayer. Thank you so much for having me back, Defiance.